Assumptions are kind of the basis of our cognitive processing. It's how we learn, in fact. We hypothesize, we make assumptions, we theorize, and then we put those to the test and we constantly experiment with those. Because we can't not assume, that's why empathy becomes really difficult. So my story goes back to probably 4 years ago when I started volunteering at the crisis line. At the crisis line, people call in, and the goal of the volunteer is to increase their ability and capacity to manage and cope with their situation. And we're taught a lot about empathy because every stage of the call, we have to constantly engage and establish trust to overcome that sense of vulnerability, not just for the caller, but for the volunteer as well. And during the training process, we learn one big rule that we must always remember, and that's to never assume. And I'll tell you why that was really important. There was one female caller. She was probably my age, and she called and told me that her dad had passed away that morning. I wanted to tell her how sorry I was and how much pain she must have been going through since the morning. But I didn't say that. I asked her, how are you feeling? She told me that she doesn't really know. She has imagined this day for a really long time, but she doesn't quite know how to celebrate it. It turned out that her dad had abused her and her mom for 20-something years, physically, mentally, sexually, for all the bad ways. So it goes kind of against our instinct because I hear so many people, including myself, say, oh, I totally understand what you're going through, but we don't really say it must feel this way, and we don't demonstrate our understanding how we're empathizing. We just say, I get it, I see what you're going through. This was a particularly important skill for me to learn, and it was quite useful. But the crisis line taught me not to assume, but I don't really know how we can do that. Assumptions are kind of the basis of our cognitive processing. It's how we learn, in fact. We hypothesize, we make assumptions, we theorize, and then we put those to the test and we constantly experiment with those. And I think I think that's why, because we can't not assume, that's why empathy becomes really difficult. But that's how we also learn, and I think that's all part of empathy. When I embarked on the journey of becoming a change maker or social entrepreneur, even though it didn't really be that way, I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to be a social entrepreneur. I just wanted to solve a problem that I felt passionate about, which was global warming. Maybe you've heard of it. So looking more into the problem, I understood that we can reduce the number of solo drivers on the road, take cars off the road, and therefore stop or at least slow down global warming. So I started talking to people about it. And it didn't take me very long for me to realize that just because I'm going to stop driving and just because I'm going to try to find a carpool to save the environment, not everyone else will. When I was searching for a business model, I went to SFU parking lot and talked to probably 200, 300 people who drove to SFU. Started with very simple questions like, why do you drive? How much do you pay? What are the pain points? What are the perceived value of alternative choices? And why are you choosing to drive every day despite the pain? And soon realized that the perceived value of carpooling could be potentially the money savings, because if you carpool every day, you can pay for your car insurance, no problem. But with that, I felt like that wasn't enough. I had all sorts of assumptions about why people carpool or why they don't, and I needed to test it further. And because my experience teaching and mentoring aspiring social entrepreneurs and teaching people about customer empathy maps and customer development, I think this is as far as it goes most of the time. You interview people on the street, you talk to people about some questions that you want to find answers to, But we need to dig deeper and really live inside of these people using empathy. One method that I used was, because I was tired of talking to people and getting rejected half of the time, asking them questions on the street, I thought, okay, what is the most natural scenario that I can create where I can make these people want to talk to me? Most of my friends were, living in the city. They weren't my customer segment market. So I thought, okay, online dating. Strangers seek to talk to strangers on these online dating platforms. So I made a profile. I put the best picture that I had of myself, so guys would talk to me. And I put nothing on my portfolio my profile except that I love carpooling. And soon enough, these guys wanted to talk about carpooling. It was the brilliant thing ever, and until my boyfriend found out, which wasn't so good. But it was great. I could really see, how it's like to drive company vehicles and how getting stuck in traffic, it's actually an incentive because you're getting paid. They call the traffic and the non-HOV lanes the money-making lanes because they're making money. Some people hate traffic but have kids to pick up. They don't have any other choice. It's very easy to complain about Broadway corridor when you've never lived in Delta and you have to wait for an hour for a bus if it doesn't come, which happens. So when I talk to these people, I feel like I have to compromise my values, that I have to not bring the environment to the conversation. It's all about how can I give you an incentive so you can change your behavior. And at the end, global warming doesn't become a part of my daily conversation. It goes sometimes forgotten for several days. And when I'm feeling burnt out, I look back and wonder why I'm doing this. Because it's really not that easy. That happens. That certainly happens in entrepreneurship, and that certainly happens in social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurs, like entrepreneurs, have to do what they're good at, have to do what they value. And it becomes really hard when your customers don't care about that. And you have to do something else. But I think that's the constant struggle. So I'm going to end here with that story. And if you want to speak more about dating websites and which platforms to use, I would be happy to share my experience or anything about transportation. Thank you.
We lose track sometimes of the strategic center of gravity of what is social entrepreneurship. And it is indeed, in my judgment anyway, empathy.
I need to get people who don't really think about whether their t-shirts that they're ordering are coming from a sweatshop and turn them into people that do think about it.